I have a user experience software that we built a few years ago, and so I guess I'm the quote-unquote expert, but I really don't think I am. So I'm going to let these experts, the actual experts that create things.
So I just hope you're putting the experts in code to us as well, right?
But anyways, we've got some pretty exciting speakers. My name is Cohen. I'm president of Actable Media Group. And G, if you don't mind starting and introducing yourself and the company that you're with.
Right, so I'm with DIRECTV. It's a satellite-based broadcast company, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, they do TV and software surrounds, television, movies, TV shows, sports, and I'm the lead UI there, so that's fine.
Well, you like the lead UI for the set-top boxes, or like all UI ever?
Of late it's been set-top boxes. There was a time when I was doing
Cool. Probably talk more about that.
I'm John Canning, Vice President of Interactive Experiences at NBC Digital. My job basically, I think somebody asked me and said, are you in TV or are you in digital? And I said, yes, because that's exactly what my job is. I spend a lot of time with TV development folks thinking about what are the native digital extensions to shows that people watch.
I'm Zach Pennington. I'm lead UX at Symantec, which means that I do a lot of UI and UX for our Norton products, which is our consumer brand, so a lot of different security applications.
Cool. So since Zach has the mic, maybe we can start with you. And I would love to know what is and isn't working in the space. So, and obviously if you can throw some personal use cases, that would be great.
What is and isn't working. So, what is working is simplifying interfaces. Is getting down to trying to figure out, what is that the user is trying to accomplish with software, and at a given time, and trying to get everything else out of the way. And we've had some success doing this recently, even not with our with some of our activation products, because we do a lot of installs on computers. I've bought a PC in the last 10 years. You are familiar with our brand. Just simplifying that flow down to the essentials of what it is we want to get the user to do, and the more we do that, we've actually increased our activation rates for a lot of things.
Cool. Is there anything that people should just really avoid? And I guess yeah, go ahead.
Really avoid badgering your user, and really work at clarifying what it is that you're asking them to do. We talk a lot with our support organization and get a lot of feedback from actual users beyond testing. Like when it's out in the field, and you learn a lot of interesting things talking with your support people.
All right, John, you want to jump in? What is working?
Sure. I think what is working, or my sort of cautionary tale, is that every time we look at new technologies that roll out, everybody comes up with sort of this new set of guidelines on how to deal with them. I still remember a couple of years ago, I go into an agency and they look at me and they go, people actually don't watch video over the internet for more than a minute, ever. That fallacy is dead. Get over it. Then the people, I literally ran into a filmmaker at a conference 2 days ago who said to me, we have to design production differently for mobile. I was like, are you high? No. That notion of producing content for mobile, no. I mean, the beautiful resolution on an iPhone or a tablet or your laptop or insert the screen here has really started saying, you know what, we can't suddenly make the mobile a redheaded stepchild or step down the experience. And I think, if you look at what the trend is, we look at a world that is mobile first from a design perspective. Because we know that people will have these devices in their hand, like this guy up front who's not paying attention to his mobile device. But they go everywhere, right? I mean, the case in point, right? It's open, it's there, he's taking notes with it, I'm sure. And we look at a design perspective that says, frankly, you're gonna start with that because you cannot predict today where the user is going to access your information necessarily. They're gonna be doing different things at different times, and that's what we have to focus on. So, well, we can get more into that, but certainly a mobile-first design, you probably hear responsive brought up God knows how many times. And that's just a design that deals with the different size of screens. I could dispel the geeky notion of that. But we look at designs, and we're still marching towards that direction, but a design that says, hey, I now know what piece of glass I'm on, and therefore I know how to format myself within boundaries, but we generally now know the range of screen sizes. They vary, but we know pretty much what the smartphone screen size is, we know roughly what a tablet screen size is, and then we know what a desktop or laptop screen size is. So we can deal with that.
And something that, I mean, aside from badgering users, is there another just something that we should just keep in mind, we should always avoid?
There's probably a long list of them. I would say that you have to be careful about your expectations of how delighted the user is to be doing what they're doing with your interface, your app, a lot of them we have overcomplicated expectations of how sophisticated our users are or the amount of things that they need to do. And we see feature creep, if you will. That constant thing of, well, maybe we should add just one more thing. I dare say sometimes looking at the thing that you brought or you're designing and then go simple. Think about what simple can mean. Now, it doesn't mean you necessarily take all the features away, but can you make the path for a user simple? Not complicated, give them access to what they really want. You know, if you've got something that they're using 80% of one feature and 20% of that other feature really necessary? You just think about things like that, but I'd say simple is something to keep in mind.
So yeah, whatever he said.
I don't know, he took notes out of it.
Whatever you said. So now speaking from my experience with DIRECTV, we are a platform essentially. We give you content on different devices. Traditionally, we have given you content on your television, on your big screen. But as these newer devices came into existence, we said, hey, how about we give you content on small devices? Excuse me. So one thing that we have done very well is giving user what they want, and that is content. So if you know your user's end goal, and if you can let them get to that end goal in a easy fashion, in a stress-free fashion, in a reliable fashion, they will keep coming back to you. And so I wasn't really joking when I said what you said, because one thing that I see in technology companies, or actually a lot of companies, is that we are very feature-centric. We are very functionality-centric. We want to build this little UI that will, log you into your Facebook and, put Starbursts all over it. And it's like, gosh, have you even asked your user if they really need it? And so, bringing the user again to the forefront and sort of balancing that with the business need it's a tricky challenge, and I believe everybody in this space, technology, entertainment, they're trying to solve it, and they have solved it to an extent, but yeah, it's a bigger battle.
I guess on that note, do users know what they want?
So that's a yes and no. And yes, they do, because if you ask them about what they want in the sphere of what they know. But I also strongly believe that when it comes to innovation, users don't know what they want. And I mean, there are plenty of examples for jobs that we can quote here. But the point is, if you are trying to solve for an unmet need, if you're trying to solve for something that hasn't been done yet, do not go ask your users. Then in those scenarios, focus groups, people who are really power users, who are able to think 4, 5, 10 years ahead, that's the group you kind of want to tap into. Or even just nerdy designers and tech guys, have them be in a room and be like, hey, here's some pizza, and now go try to envision the future and try to build me a roadmap for it. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think the key, and he pointed out that the challenge in our business in entertainment and content is nobody really cares what we do except for the content, right? Like we can make flashy, we can do things around content, but at the end of the day, that's the product that somebody wants to see. And any time you get between the consumer and what their end goal, I mean, you know, why does Amazon have one-click buy? It's to get you as quickly to the possible resolution that we want. You want to get to that, I want this, it should be shipped to my house. That's that sort of beauty of saying, how do I make that path as efficient as possible? Because as much as we're in love with what we do, the reality is they're on a mission, they've got something to do. Now, if you're on a different kind of product, if you're a product that people loiter and hang out and explore, it's a different goal. But you've got to kind of identify what the consumer wants from you. That, you know, what is your product that you're giving to them, and then make that as most efficient as possible to get.
Zach, a question for you on that note, just because I think that you probably have the widest, well, I don't know actually, now that I know, but you probably, but you have in terms of, I guess just, right, I mean, you're dealing with users that are oftentimes installing things on devices, and you've got such a wider range of how technically savvy one user can be versus the other. How do we choose which customer or visitor or client to go to design for?
We try to design for everybody, but through a funnel, right? We try to design our interfaces to handle, say, 70% of our users based on what they want, what we've talked to them about, what they say, look, I'm hiring you to secure my devices, I want to know if I'm protected. So we're working on interfaces that display that in the most efficient manner possible, right? Like, that's what the user cares about. They don't care about anything else. Those other people, they care about more detail. So we give them that detail, but we don't stick it up front. We make that accessible. So you try to serve as many as you can, but you don't try to do one that serves everything all the time, because then you wind up with the confusion and the extra support calls, because I really don't care about all this extra stuff. Just tell me what it is that I want to know.
Thanks. I'd say it comes down to a bit of which business you're in, and there is no shame necessarily in going after the super user or the zealot customer if you know, in some businesses where the freemium model, broad brush of free still doesn't net you any income. And I've found that sometimes if you focus and if you delight that super customer, the influencer, if you will, you delight them, then it has a good ripple effect, right? If you know that you have people that are like dedicated to your content, your product, and you really focus in on them, they will radiate out. The passive sort of, sometimes I visit that site or sometimes I buy that product, how much is that going to gain? So sometimes just turning that sort of on its head, instead of saying I'm going to be everything for every man, say, you know what, I want to focus on this particular group because they're important to us, and we're going to delight them with what they want. So it's sometimes counterintuitive, but it also challenges you as a business to think about who your customers are, where your revenue comes from, how you're serving them. There is that broad brush of people, because if it's, say, a free product / a pay gate, what are they doing for you other than taking your time, energy, customer service? You gotta ask this question.
So, can you repeat the question?
Well, I think the question.
Well, it kind of got diluted, and it kind of veered into multiple topics. So
Yes, I think maybe at this point we can just transition over. Just talk maybe about, give me some case studies, some design case studies, some personal things that we can learn from as a group.
Well, so I heard what my peers said here, and designing for one user or one set of users is a very tricky challenge. So I kind of agree with that. But I believe it varies from market to market and the segment that you're going for. So while there may be a scenario where designing for the power user may be a way to get other users in, and this is just my opinion, so I don't think it works for everything, and you know, that you can pretty much say about anything you say here, it's a use case, it may apply to you, or you may morph it into something else, and then it may work for you. So, again, now going back to the users, I mean, what we deal with is everybody from 6 to 60, so have fun designing, enjoy. And it's what that does is that it basically dilutes the UI, it makes it really invisible, or it tries to make it really invisible and really simple, so everybody can use it. But in those scenarios, you do run into the issue, which is exact opposite of what you were saying, and that is that sometimes the power users who are like, hey, I want to, you know, get under the hood and do these really weird things. I'm like, dude, you can't do it. Please, just, you know, it's a simple UI. The need here is to give you content. To, you know, we have identified that need, by the way, and you know, let's solve for it. And then, you know, we say, okay, there's 80% user that we have solved for, but then there's a power user who sometimes like, not you guys.
I think that's a good answer. All of you have good answers. All right, now you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Particularly on apps, because it's usually tied to some kind of a app review, those kind of things people are doing. As a concern, I've noticed.
Big room over here.
Particularly when it comes to apps, because there's usually reviews attached to them and the wait for people to comment back. What I've noticed is increasingly users are using that not to necessarily like review or post comments about it, but like suggest features and all these other kind of things. My question is, number one, is that something that a lot of developers are actually like looking at to get the input for the features from? Or is it more based on when actually submitting things directly to the site or to the proper channels? I was just curious because it just seems like it's getting even more and more, and I was just curious to see on your end of it, is that being used in that way, or because there tends to be a trend of more and more that's coming in that from that source because it's a convenient source as opposed to having somebody send an email or calling someplace else.
I'd just say from my perspective, God knows how many products I've shipped in the marketplace. That is probably one of the channels we pay attention to most, other than our own research, because it is, whether it's valid or not, you can do the litmus test. You can look at it and say, you know, have I seen 12 comments that are around this feature set? Are we missing something? These people are vocal, they care, they're putting it out there in such a way that you have to take it serious. And any company that doesn't spend time paying attention to that is toast. And you know, whether it's apps and the App Store reviews, or you know, I dare say social media these days. I was in a conversation with somebody from Emirates last night, and we were talking about the Asiana crash in San Francisco. And he said, you know what, we were very slow to get into social media because we live in a business that if we screw up, people die. And you die on social media if you screw that up. And he said, you look what happened to Asiana. They didn't respond, they didn't get on it, and they were torn apart. So you may not be in a life or death business, but the fact is that these channels exist, and if you dip your toe into that water, you're playing the game. And you gotta be there, and you gotta pay attention to it. You know, you'll see some stuff that is like, are you kidding? It's the super user who says, I actually like programming interfaces to the cable box. No, go away. But you know, you gotta run it through the filter. So you know, for my business, it's something we pay a lot of attention to.
So yeah, just to add to that, if you're trying to get feedback from the users, the best place to do it is a place where they're comfortable. So sometimes when we have to do research, we basically go to their house and we sit with them on their couch and ask them how to use television, or hey, how do you open your app and manage your playlist or view content. So apps, or the App Store is one of those places where users are passionate enough and they're vocal enough. So that's a more natural environment to gather feedback, what works, what doesn't work, and what you should work on, what you should improve upon. So my candid opinion is that's a better place to get feedback than an official feedback form.
Is this a good place to give you feedback?
Oh yeah.
Today?
Absolutely, enough if you have.
No, because I've been using DirectV for a long time, and
Anyway,
everything is a lot.
Can we
I
actually?
think it's a great company. You want me to?
Yeah, let's do it after the.
It's not bad at all.
No, it's not a question of being bad. I just let's go. Let's ask a few questions, and then maybe you guys can hook up. Sure. Zach, you want to touch on that?
I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add other than, and it's.
I guess what do you use?
You can't ignore it, right? We absolutely pay attention to App Store reviews, because for a lot of users, they just wind up using it as they think that it's the best way to communicate with you for tech support, especially on mobile stuff, right? It's not so much on desktop things, and the support links work better on that experience. So we get that, and then it's very useful on the Android side because we can actually contact the user, right? If someone can come up with a problem and we can have a developer contact them directly, and that's a great experience because if we can fix their problem, it just blows their mind that we jumped in there off an App Store review and reached out to them directly, right? We can't do that on the Apple side. So the Apple, for iOS reviews, it's more of a barometer. You try and see, okay, is this a recurring problem? Is this an outlier? Can we duplicate it? And then for future suggestions, sometimes they're great. So you can never ignore it. You have to take it all in, but you definitely have to filter it, and you have to remind people about outliers and say, like, okay, I know you keep asking for this because a user said it, but how many users said it? Oh, one. So yeah.
When going from desktop to mobile, what does that process look like? How should we, those of us that have, the classic website, a classic application, clearly we have to strip things out, right? It can't be exactly the same or have the same feature sets. What approach do you guys take for that? Zach, we're starting with the microphone.
Well, you look at the platform, because there are definitely, other than the screen size, there are certain things you can do, right? There are certain things you can do on iOS. Sometimes you can do more things on Android, so you take that into account and kind of like, all right, what are the things that we could duplicate, and then bring them over, and then kind of distill that down and just work on a very task-focused, more of a unitasking environment than you would necessarily on a desktop app.
Yeah.
I think what you do is you stop for a second, because you don't want to do I've got a website, I need to cram it into mobile, what do I strip out? What I think you do is you have to start from, again, a mobile first sort of attitude and say, all right, what are the people who are picking up their mobile phone trying to do with us? And then approach the design from there. Because the challenge is if you go and take your website and go, well, I take these three things out, you're doing yourself a disservice because you haven't asked that question. It actually is an interesting sort of liberating moment where you can go back and say, because your websites have probably gone through several iterations, it morphs, it changes, somebody may have mentioned responses, they may not. But this is sort of a liberating, interesting moment where you can say, what if we just completely started over again? And did it in a mobile way? Because, frankly, you might see that flows back into the desktop. So again, if you do a responsive design with mobile first in mind, and you're simplifying, you're cleaning it up, you can bring in more features potentially in the desktop. But again, it depends on the business you're in and what customers and what you're trying to serve. You frankly could be maybe mostly a mobile company. Like, if you're doing a frequent flyer app that is meant to be something that I'm using when I'm in airports, chances are 99% of your customers would prefer it to be on a mobile device. It's just been a legacy of being on the laptop on the website because it had to be. But they're frankly like, I'm running through an airport, I don't get open my laptop. So you can start changing your mind about it. It also gets into issues of, I love this argument, do I do an app or do I do a responsive design website? I'd love to go into a diatribe about apps or fads, but But it,
I think you should.
Please do.
Please do.
Show of hands, who wants to hear a diatribe right now?
all right, I'll give you the short version of this. The reason we have apps is because Steve Jobs was very opinionated and wanted to control the experience of the iPhone. He did not like the concept of an uncontrolled user experience. He wanted to give you what he thought you should have. He invented this whole app notion. If you look at any point in time in technology, and this gets somewhat esoteric, we've always had the new, cool, interesting technology. We have to download, we have to install, Java, Flash, keep marching your way through it, media players when they were new, apps for devices. But you've got to admit, it's somewhat of an archaic notion that any time I want to access something, I got to go do a download, and if it's too big, I'm going to have to wait till I get to Wi-Fi. And it constantly updates itself. I don't know how many of you have an app on your mobile device that needs updated, but I usually have about 12.
Fewer than I used to.
Some don't, right? Like, yeah, it's getting better. But the reality is that it was at a point in time because the mobile devices wanted to control that user experience because of the kind of mobile device it is. We will see an evolution of that. Apps are still very useful right now, especially in the gaming world.
So instead of an actual standalone iPhone app, what the difference between a responsive site and actually just a mobile version? Usually like people put like M dot and do a completely different coded mobile version.
Right, a responsive design does away with the M dot
So
concept.
which one would you recommend?
So you're talking about three different things. What you're doing is you're talking about designing a second website, M dot, my website. We're talking about responsive, and then we're talking about an app.
Correct.
Okay. The M dot web, my website,
Yeah.
old notion,
Exactly.
go home.
Yeah.
Responsive
Yeah.
versus an app.
Yeah. Okay.
And then what you do is you get into weighing. Again, if you're a frequent flyer concept, chances are you can probably go straight for a mobile app because your vast majority of your customers are doing that device. You want to take advantage of the native applications. I know you're dying. You're probably plus
So the apps aren't there.
The apps aren't dead. It's a period of time.
He's
But
saying the apps will die.
Absolutely.
apps, I want apps to die, right? But moving on. You have a framework. You can have a framework app, for example, that is just a shell that uses mostly HTML5. So you can constantly update it. You don't have to do new updates to the app itself, but what you're doing is you can update your web page. And that's what a number of companies are doing because they want to get something across a broad brush of platforms, iOS, and then the 27 million versions of Android. Sorry, this gets a little esoteric, but the reality is that if you decide to do an app and you want to go native, your development budget goes through the frickin' roof. Because native means that then you're going to have to do another version for Android, and then you've got all the versions of Android to support natively, and you've got to support iOS. And iOS developers aren't Android developers. In some cases, you'll have to hire two different companies working off the same design methodology because you want the thing that looks different. So you can get into a challenge, but frankly, there comes a point, like if you're designing a game, you may want to be taking advantage of the native hardware platforms, and you can't do that through web. So there is no silver bullet. I mean, my frustration with apps is that environment, everybody's gone, it became we want an app for that. Why? What is the app doing for you other than we need an app? Because there are a lot of other answers potentially than just an app. But that's the.
Can you explain what you meant by using the native components of the phone?
Sure. Let's see. You can probably rattle them off faster than I can. But when you're building a native app for the phone, for example, you have access to the video player, the input and outputs. Let's see. Camera, storage.
Yeah, so you go into processor.
Sorry, take a mic.
Sorry. Let's say you're building an app for store locator. So you can it's a native functionality that you say, find a store near me. Now that kind of stuff doesn't happen on the mobile web as much. So I think at the end of the day, you kind of have to ask yourself, is app really prudent for your business, or if a mobile web will solve your business needs. And the good thing about responsive is that it's a common code base. Your content is still unified. It's coming from the same CMS, so it's easier to maintain, and it's really cost effective. But again, if you're building a game, if HTML5 isn't going to cut it for you, and you have to go via an app. If you're getting into content, if you're getting into videos, so Netflix or this company is known as DIRECTV. If you're getting into movies and TV shows, and it's pulling movie shows that are stored on your DVR, then it's safer to go with an app. But apps do cost a lot more, so I do agree with this gentleman here that it's a question that you have to ask yourself, and there's no silver bullet, there's no one right answer.
Yeah, if you're a media company, you almost have to develop native apps because of security, right? If you're any kind of company that is got any kind of restricted media, or you have to because of rights, typically I think you would have to go with the native app, because you couldn't build a security layer that is approved by a studio, for example, in an HTML5 version. And some of these things will shift. I mean, you can actually do some great stuff in HTML5, but it is still, HTML5's video handling capabilities are still young. They still need a lot of work.
Do you see that people take advantage of the iOS for the advertising purposes that Apple provides?
Mean that they break it?
Huh?
I have an interesting thing on that. I'll tell you about later if you guys want.
For sure. I mean, if you look at statistics, when the amount of money that somebody makes when they get featured on the App Store versus not being featured on the App Store is 10x or more, right? It's kind of like winning the lottery. So,
And you won't be featured on the App Store if you don't build a native app. Right? but it's a choice you make. Like, if you don't care, if you don't think you'll necessarily score big in the App Store, if you're making decisions, cost decisions about not going native, you balance that out by knowing that the Apple editorial team is not going to put you anywhere near the top, right? But if you've got other channels you're marketing to, or you've got a captured consumer set that wants this, right? Like, but you make those decisions.
and I think what you want to avoid is kind of the old mindset of, oh, I'll do some SEO and that will make my website, successful. There's that mindset of, oh, I'll do a native app and then it'll just, magic will happen. It'll be like, make app, step 2, step 3, profit. It's like, you can't just do that, right? You can't drop out the actual marketing component of it, or the, making sure that people know what the hell you're doing.
Question, let me give you my, I put my comfortable shoes for this stuff.
I guess my question was towards designing for a specific audience. I think you kind of talked about this earlier, from designing from 6 to 60. When you have a niche market and you're focused on colors and what drives the end user, how can you be more engaging with the customer or with the end user? Do you guys see websites becoming more interactive? Do you guys see websites becoming more of a resource tool for the end user to discover new products, new ideas, new things that the company is putting out? What do you think?
I think you're lucky because it was designed for a niche audience.
Who wants it? Who wants it?
So first things first, if you have a niche audience, if you have defined your audience down to that level of granularity, you're lucky. Congratulations. That's the first battle. Second battle, and take it from a crazy UX guy. What you have to do at that point is basically research. And I'm going to just ramble about it for a few more minutes. Research basically goes into 2 types. One is qual, the other is quant. So qualitative research and quantitative research. Right? Now, qualitative is when you find 10 power users and I'm going to sit with you, I want to buy you coffee, tell me everything you hate, use it on a day-to-day basis. And you just write paragraphs and paragraphs. You just document everything that they do. And it's basically to get to their emotions, what they like, what they don't like, what works, what doesn't work. Quantitative, it's more about you just gather data, it's analytics, it's you see trends of people using it at a certain point of time, a certain year of month, or you see certain ins and outs, you see certain patterns, and you kind of design for that pattern. So essentially, take your audience, understand them at an emotional level as a singular entity, but you also understand them as a group, and then build upon it.
If you can get down to eye tracking, right? I mean, there are research firms that they sit people in front of a screen, a television screen, whatever it is, and they track where their eyes go. I mean, you know, it gets down to when you land on something or you're watching a commercial, what am I looking at, right? Oh yeah, I mean, and that happens all the time, right? Like commercials are designed because they know where your eyes are going, right? They know how to draw your eyes to something. Like this is not people guessing it, right? And when you have a niche audience, you can hone in on it. And you want to go live with them. You want to talk to them. You want to adopt them. I mean, you know, we talk about the power user, the MVP, call it what you will. But there's nothing better than getting those people you know that are advocates for your product, whatever it is, and you adopt them, you love them, you empower them, because they will tell you everything. They will be the people that you roll out the new stuff to first. They become the influencers to the other community. I mean, I used to work in the hallowed halls of this company and we're sitting in. We had whole armies of people that were MVPs. They were volunteers. We loved them. We shipped them free product. We made sure they were on early betas. We went to them and said, we flew them to Redmond, right? We flew them to Redmond. We sat in a room. We said, we want to tell you what we're thinking. We want your feedback. We really listened to them. Because quite frankly, we were building a product for them and the wave beyond. So whatever you can do to get into their head, I'd do it. Because maybe they don't want a website to sell them something. Maybe they do. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? Is you want to find out if they want your product, what's the best means to get your product? It could be carrier pigeon. You know, the website is just a way to facilitate. You know, some businesses have reverted back to, you know, good old-fashioned phone calls because you like a human on the other side of the phone. You like to talk to somebody and book an airline flight or something, all right?
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, please. Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to do the work.
John, this is probably for you. Obviously, second screen experience has become huge. Can you maybe speak more to that? Yeah, as it relates to, I mean, maybe experience at NBC and what your thoughts on that?
I got it, please.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, good. Second screen experiences. So it's sort of a catch-all. I call it interactive experiences. I call it second screen experiences. You know, I know it's going to be shocking, but what works is when you give the consumer something that they feel like they have some power or influence, right? What are the most popular sort of digital second screen experiences around television? Certainly in the reality base, or, you know.
Can you explain to some of us what second screen is?
Absolutely. It's very simple. It's that screen that you have while you're watching TV. That laptop, mobile device, doesn't matter. It's the other screen that you have when you're watching a show. And let's face it, the statistics say you all have one. Statistics also say you're mostly doing something unrelated to the television show. What everybody in the content world would love for you to do is pay a little more attention to our show. Why? Because the advertisers want you to pay a little more attention to the show. But we also want to delight you. We also want to keep you engaged. We want to give you something that gives you a reason to watch our show at 9 o'clock as opposed to just on VOD. So we create experiences that are tied sometimes to live shows. You have a show like The Voice, right? It lives or dies by people voting. And we get a lot of people voting. Why? Because they influence the show, right? Like shows where people vote, but it has no bearing on the show and you never actually see it, you have a lot less numbers on that kind of thing. Than a show where they said the audience has this opinion, and this opinion just decided who was going home. Basically, enough people care. I know it's shocking, it took a while for TV to figure that out, but there you go, first one. So those are the kinds of things we look at. And there's no one size fits all, right? The second screen experience for Game of Thrones is vastly different than a second screen experience for the mobile. At the Game of Thrones, who here watched Game of Thrones? Okay. It's easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Second screen experience, how many of you use the app and the tablet just to figure out who the heck these people are and what the heck is going on in this show? And those of you who haven't are probably just lying. You know, that's a second screen experience because it's a very dense show. If you miss an episode or you're trying to catch up, you're like, who are these people and who's married to what? You know, where the voice is very simple. Vote. Vote now. Voting's open. Go vote. You know, so it's vastly different, but we have to keep that in mind. You don't have the one size fits all, and we constantly battle with that. I'd say, you know, NBC and I think other broadcasters have started looking at this. We're also getting less precious about you gotta come to us, right? I mean, we're prolific on YouTube at this point, right? Like, you want to go see what happened last night at Fountain, you can go on his app or you can go on YouTube and you can see the monologue and things like that. So we've also looked at this concept of, instead of making everybody come to us, go to where they are, right? Embrace the different social media extensions. Put out the content in those various social media silos that they expect from us. So it's been, and it's a work in progress because as people's habits shift, as the technology shifts, you're constantly chasing that. You know, it used to be, it was all about the website. Well, that's starting to morph to be all about the mobile thing in your hand. And what are we doing for that? What are you doing with your experience when you're watching television and when the show isn't on it? Right? So there's also things, what are you doing it today before you go home? Are you checking to see what show's on? Are you setting your DVR? I mean, you know, I'll toss the microphone to these guys because these guys they're living that world of trying to keep you engaged with their delivery of content to you. You know, why aren't you going to go subscribe to Comcast? Yeah, why isn't he going to go subscribe to Comcast?
You don't want to go to Comcast, please. Go with anybody but no. That was intentional. So going back to the second screen experience, it's yeah. I think one thing I would like to add there is sports. So you know, yeah. So with those, it's your second screen becomes an extension of your first screen. So you're watching content, but you want other information, and sometimes, you know, the organization or the company is good enough that they can keep you within their ecosystem. They can say, hey, you know what, you stick with my app, my second screen experience, and I'll give you enough rich information that you can that you wouldn't want to go somewhere else. And there are scenarios where it doesn't happen, and they go into Twitter and they go into a companion app, and they will try to get more additional information, data from other points, just to consume it, just to grasp what's going on with the sports, with the election, so on and so on. So
let me just peel something back, because I think for me at least, and I don't know, some of us here, second screen is awesome, but I think a lot of us, you know, don't probably have to figure that piece of our business out yet. What can we do, really, just that we can take away from this session to just make our customers have a better experience? Like, what is I think what you said early on, Zach, which was to not badger our users, maybe think of like, what's sort of the opposite of that? What can we really what can we take away? What should our customer experience when they visit our sites?
Well, you can never think too much about onboarding, right? You never ever think too much about onboarding. And that's the Golden Gate Bridge of your software development. You're gonna start painting it at one end, you're gonna get to the other end, you're gonna come back, and you're gonna keep going, you're gonna keep iterating, you're gonna keep refining. And then anything you're trying to do with your app, like if you want to enable sharing, if you want to, if you decide you're gonna use Facebook for sign-in, go use the app on the platform and really get in there and make these things as frictionless as possible. Like if you have Password security is a big deal these days, right? Everyone's heard of break-ins and Target, and you have to keep changing your password. People keep saying, like, I don't think a month goes by that a major service that I use doesn't send me an email saying that, hey, our password database got hacked, you should probably update yours. And so if you're going to update yours and start using a password manager and coming up with unique passwords for all your sites, which is the security practice, if your app wants to sign you in with Facebook, well, most people have the Facebook app on their phone, and that can do the sign-in. So pass it over there. Don't go through a web experience. Don't open up a web view that says, hey, log into Facebook in your app. Right? Just make these experiences as frictionless as possible when you're trying to use other services.
Yeah, I was actually going to echo that, which is that this notion of get the technology out of the way, and that's that whole frictionless concept. Too often the rules we put into place or the procedures we put into place because marketing says they want to gather data before they can sign up for the site, or will just churn your customers away. The drop off that I've seen in apps from what it takes to install, which is again a barrier to entry. Installing an app is a barrier to entry. To then having to sign up, to then get to what I want to do, can be a painful process. And anything you can do to minimize that pain is key. Like, I battled with the marketing team. I said, yes, I know you want all these fields of information. How about we get them in first? Otherwise, they won't care. They won't want to get past this barrier. They'll decide, yeah, this is not worth my time. So those are, keep the friction low.
Yeah, keep the friction low. So I'm not, keep the friction to a zero. I'm not going to talk about apps or mobile sites or responsive sites. But there are three things that I have found to be of high value when you're designing a mobile site, when you're designing a mobile experience, not site, experience. The first one there is the content. So one thing you will struggle with is that it's a small screen and nobody wants to read anything on a screen that's small. Nielsen did some research on this. Nielsen, if you guys don't know, they're heavyweights in UX and they do plenty of research and studies. So they did the research. They said if a user reads 33% of the text on a website, they read 17-18% of text on a mobile site. What that basically means is that the screen is so small that they just give up on reading. So you have to be very intelligent about the content you present to the user. It's a small screen, they don't have a lot of time. The second thing here is context, and this is something that I'll be very honest with you guys, I failed with, and I'm pretty sure every designer who has worked here or in the space has failed with, and that is that with your traditional desktops, you're sitting in an office or you're sitting in a living room. With mobile sites, mobile experiences, you're walking around, you're on a run, you're in a bus. So to give them a context of what they want, it's a very tricky challenge. And this is where research comes into play. You kind of try to understand what are some of the big needs, use cases that are here. Hey, I'm bored and I just want to watch something, or I'm really in an emergency scenario and really want to get to this thing as quickly as possible. So that's the second thing. The third thing here is the interface in itself. You really have to understand that this is a touch, swipe, gesture-based interface. It's really intimate to you. You hold it in your hand and then sort of use it around. And if it's horsey, if it's ugly, if it doesn't inspire trust, then you will lose people. I mean, you will lose users, let alone customers. So yeah.
We have time. Oh, I have one. We have time for one more question. Awesome. You guys taught them everything they need to know.
I guess I have a question. Why not?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'd love your thoughts on the trend that is like this Tinder design, right? Just the one swiping, and that's really all you need to do.
It's like, we want our band.
So like there's a new app now that's called Weave, is basically Tinder for networking. So like this, it goes back to the simplicity thing. People want to do as little as possible and get maximum function out of just basically using one finger. And I'd just love your thoughts. Like, is there any? Do you think there's any legs to this? Like, it just goes to the simplicity thing that you guys were talking about.
Yeah, I look at what we did with our full episode app. It was try to get that really simple, get into a show and watch it, right? I mean, it goes back to when we were doing website design, it was how many clicks does it take the user to get to what they want, right? So if you translate that into the mobile swiping world, it's like how many swipes does it take to get what I'm doing? And to do what I need to do. And, Tinder is a very straightforward, I got one function and that's it, but it serves that purpose. And they don't need to make it necessarily more complicated for what they're trying to do. So I think, it's finding the main feature and making that the most accessible, easiest to do thing. There may be more features. It may, there may be the menu on the side you can pull out and do other stuff, but what's that main thing that you're trying to accomplish? And again, it's context specific. Like, I think about entertainment as different than necessarily a security app. But it's a good trend to think about because it challenges your notion of how much stuff you have to pile into an app to delight the customer. Right?
So you guys have those conversations with her?
Oh, absolutely. Constantly. Because you get excited and you think, oh, how do I get, the 6 to 60, right? Like, oh, and you had this, and then you really have to step back and go, did we just make this a cluster problem? Did we just add everything and the kitchen sink? What do they really want to do?